good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is that you are joining me for this video. Thank you yet again for clicking on the Penboy Roy Fountain Pen Review channel. The subject of today's video is going to be the Conklin Word Gauge Stealth. This pen was provided to me by Goldspot Pens at cost for an honest, unbiased, and truthful review, of which I am dedicated to always. So thank you to the good people at Goldspot Pens for helping me out. Now, before I get into the neutral zone, the good, the bad, the ugly, and high noon regarding this pen, what I want to do is I want to go over some background information. Starting with a gentleman, his name was Roy Conklin. Roy Conklin in 1898 established the Conklin Pen Company. What he did was he innovated pens. He popped out this thing right here. This is called the Conklin Crescent Filler. This was a tool used by Mark Twain a lot. That's why you see these sold as the Mark Twain Crescent Filler. And the reason why is because it had a bladder in it and it held its own ink. That was the first time in pen history that a pen was able to hold its own ink without being dipped and written with, over and over and over. Innovation continued all the way until 1930s, at which time they released what's called a Nosac. It was a twist filling mechanism that drew up ink into the body without the use of a sac. Therefore, the play on words, Nosac. I guess maybe back in the 30s it was in poor taste to go around saying no sac. In any event, shortly after the Nosac, the word gauge was introduced. The word gauge also having a twist filling mechanism, as we know now as the piston filler. Obviously back then it was not made of carbon fiber. In 1955, sadly and unfortunately, Conklin ceased all operations and stopped making any kind of pens or products. And that continued all the way until a man named Robert Rosenberg rescued the company, revived the company, and started it up again. That was in the year 2000. 9 years later, Jaffa purchased the brand, and now all the distribution and anything that has to do with Conklin goes through Jaffa. In 2018, I received the pen, and now I'm doing a review because I want to talk to you about all the aspects about it. Now, enough background information, moving on to the neutral zone. Aspects about the pen that are neither good or bad, or could be good or bad depending on you. Now, let me start with the nib. If you take a look at this nib, what you're going to find is it has a very unique sheen. It is very shiny, and it is glazed with a coat that it differentiates itself from other black nibs. For example, if you take a look at the Homo sapien Dark Age 23 karat palladium black nib, the Edison steel black nib, the Goulet nib on a Conklin Nighthawk, and finally, the word gauge. Now, it has a different look to it. Worth pointing out, it's neither good or bad. If you like it, then it's good. If you don't like it, it's not good. It has the same cheapy plastic feed that you see on all Conklin and all Stipulas and all Jinhao pens. Now, they don't offer any problems. They always seem to provide good ink flow, so why the hell not and go ahead and use it. Now, this pen here is also made of carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is known to be 5 times stronger than steel, yet it is much lighter. I want you also to take a close look at the ink window. If you look at the ink window, it is exactly the same as our good friend the Toccaferro. It is the same size, it holds the same amount of ink, it's the same length. Everything about the ink window is the same except for the color in this case. Another aspect that the word gauge stealth shares with the Toccaferro is in the piston mechanism. It rotates counterclockwise to tighten and to fill, and it rotates clockwise to empty and unscrew. Similarly, the mechanism that spins and turns is also stationary. That means as you turn it, it doesn't come out further or go in further as you turn it. So therefore, they had to make it tighter than usual. A dissimilarity is in that with the Toccaferro, it's difficult to turn that mechanism, so what I said to ameliorate that and make it easier was to take it and cap it and then turn the cap. In this case with the word gauge, that is not true for the word gauge. Although it is tight, it's not as tight as the Toccaferro. This pen, the Conklin Word Gauge Stealth, also shares similarities with the Goulet exclusive, the Conklin Nighthawk. Now, if you look at the grips on both of these pens, you'll notice that they have the exact same shape, exact same design, and the only difference being that the newer iteration, the Word Gauge, has a matte finish versus the Conklin Nighthawk having a glossy finish. I would have to say that if the Toccaferro and the Nighthawk met, fell in love, and had a baby, the Word Gauge is what would have popped out. Now, moving on from the neutral stuff, we're going to go into the good, the bad, the ugly, starting with the good. Now, obviously with the good, I always like to start with the nib. The nib on this pen was very smooth, zero feedback. It was perfectly tuned and perfectly adjusted. Here's another interesting fact about this nib, and you'll see later in the test fire section. This nib offers line variation that is less steel and more so character of a pen with a softer gold nib. I wouldn't rely on the pen for constant line variation, but you can get a significant amount of line variation. The ink capacity is fantastic. It's a 2mm ink capacity, and apparently with a 2mm ink capacity, what you can achieve is about 6,000 words. This is not that accurate, but who cares? This pen represents meticulous quality control. I was not able to find a single thing wrong with this pen, and I examined this pen and I looked at it up and down, searching for flaws and whatnot. But here's another thing. I couldn't even find seams on the threads of the grip section, the cap. I used a magnifying glass. I did everything I could to find some kind of flaw on this pen and was not able to find one. The MSRP of this pen is $275. Now, retailers across the United States of America offer the pen on an average between $150 and $160. So it's a pretty significant discount, and I think that makes this pen the second least expensive carbon fiber pen I've seen since the Conklin Nighthawk. So if you missed out on the Conklin Nighthawk, this is a good one to pick up. If you missed out on the Toccaferro, because those are limited to 351, this one, believe it or not, is very similar to the Toccaferro in the aspects that I mentioned earlier. I would say that this is actually a good one to get if you missed that. This one is not a limited edition. It is going to be a regular edition. Now, of course, there might be a point in time where they put it to bed, but as of right now, they don't have a certain number. Lastly, this pen has a lifetime warranty. Enough with the good, moving on to the bad. Let's talk coin. For $150 to $160 on a carbon fiber pen with a piston mechanism that writes spectacularly right out of the box, it's hard to find any bad with regard to dollar amount. But I have to rack my brain because I got to come up with something. The only thing that really does bother me, if anything at all, is the fact that I don't know who the hell makes the nibs on these pens. So I've done some digging and investigating, and the only thing I could come up with as a definitive answer is that the owner of Jaffa wants to protect his interests and keep the suppliers and vendors of who supplies his nibs confidential, so that perhaps companies that are not as, I don't know, imaginative or creative don't steal his ideas. That's an acceptable answer, I guess. It's one of those answers that you can't really argue with. That's somebody's preference. But it's also one of those answers that piques suspicion in brains like mine. It makes me wonder, well, is it outsourced and you don't want people to know? Is that why? Because if that were the case, you wouldn't have to tell anybody. So there's that. It's not that big of a deal if it is outsourced. If it is, who cares? Say so. If it's not, and you're just trying to protect your interests, great. But the ambiguity behind it sometimes leaves a sour taste in my mouth. That's all I got for the bad. Moving on to the ugly. That which should not be, but is, aesthetically or whatnot. Like I said before, I scoured this pen looking for something that was aesthetically displeasing. I couldn't find anything. Not a single thing. I was shocked. No wear on the clip. I couldn't find any scratches. This pen was designed and then made with attention to detail and quality control. Makes me happy. However, if I did have to say one thing that was just probably not okay, is what came inside the box. What you have here is your standard sleeve. You have your standard coffin-shaped box. You got 2 cards in there. One of them is your warranty, and the other one's an instruction on how to fill a converter as well as cartridges. If you look very closely and you take a second to read it, what you will notice is the instructions are for your traditional converters and piston fillers, meaning you would turn the pen clockwise to fill it, counterclockwise to empty it. Now, if you followed those instructions, what would happen is you would probably get ink all over yourself. Basically, I would have liked a separate set of instructions for a pen that has reverse operation to be included. Additionally, there's no indication on the instructions or anywhere in the box on what part of the end cap is the actual mechanism. So if you look at it here, what you end up seeing is 2 parts. Now those 2 parts look almost as if it was just designed this way and it's only one piece. I didn't realize that the back end was the piston and the front end was fixed. So I'm sitting there trying to turn it and it wouldn't move. That's all the ugly I have. It's high noon. Decision-making time. Should you or should you not pull the trigger on this pen, the Conklin Word Gauge Stealth? After mulling over all the good, the bad with regard to the ambiguity behind the nibs, and the minor ugly with the instructions not being appropriate to the pen, I have to say, this is a definitive pull the trigger, fire away. This word gauge, although the gauge in and of itself with the 5,000 down to 1,000 is most likely worthless, what you're getting here is a carbon fiber weaved pen. Very strong, very light. You got a piston mechanism that works very well, holds a ton of ink. It has a number 6 steel nib that writes fantastic, gives you nice line variation. It writes perfectly out of the box, holds a lot of ink, is tough. It's a good everyday writer. I can't think of anything to dissuade someone in buying it. If you got any questions, please feel free to send me an email at penboyroy@gmail.com. I hope this helped. Please stay tuned for the writing sample/demonstration in the test fire section of this channel. Thank you once again for tuning in and clicking on the Penboy Roy Fountain Pen Review channel. Stay tuned. Be well, be safe.